Welcome. This yin practice is dedicated to the equinox, a time of balance and a time of cycles. The postures in the sequence today include half saddle pose, lateral bends in dragonfly pose, square pose, and a reclined twist pose. Always useful props are pillows and blankets for painful pressure points underneath joints. But if you have some yoga props available to you, like blocks and a yoga bolster, those too might be handy. So we'll get started. This practice starts off with a little bit of breath work. But before we start breathing or noticing our breath, find a comfortable seat. You can sit like I'm sitting if this is stable, if it allows you to open up your torso so that you can get in more air, better breath here. Otherwise, it can be any kind of a seat of your choosing that feels stable. And then once you've found that seat, once you've kind of found some roots, your inner ground, then you can begin to soften a little bit. So your face can be soft, your eyes can be soft. And you can start noticing things that are going on in the present moment. So you notice the temperature of the room, the temperature of your skin, you notice maybe the sounds around you, you notice the little physical sensations that are happening in your body. You can also notice your mental and emotional qualities here. Maybe just notice what kind of mood you're in and let that be acceptable, whatever mood it might be. Let the thoughts that are going through your mind be acceptable here. And then let your breath be acceptable. Just notice how you're inhaling and exhaling, and then let it all be okay. We'll try a little bit more focused, deeper breath, just to create a little bit of stress in the vascular system here. This is called 3-part breathing. So first, maybe just begin to deepen your breath by lengthening it. So the inhales and the exhales would be a little bit longer than normal, but not uncomfortable, at least not yet here. Notice that. And then if your nasal passages are clear, see if you can just breathe through your nose by gently sealing your lips shut. If any of this gets too strainful, then you can breathe through your mouth. But maybe slightly tuck your chin, raise your head up towards the ceiling, roll your shoulders back to see if that helps ease the breath here. And then we'll segue into a modified form of Ujjayi pranayama, known as 3-part breath. So after your next exhale, maybe exhale a little bit more and lightly pull your belly in towards your spine. And then when you inhale, visualize the inhale beginning from the bottom third of your abdomen. So the low abdomen, clear down here. Fill that space up, expand it. And then continue to inhale and fill up your lower ribs, your midsection, kind of right above your belly button here. And then continue to fill up your upper ribs all the way to your collarbones until your torso feels full and expansive. And then exhale from top to bottom in the same order. First, release your upper third, let it soften. Release the next third. Release the bottom third, pull your belly into your spine. And then on your next inhale, initiate it from the bottom of your torso, first third, and then the second third, and then the third third, and then exhale from top to bottom. So rib cage relaxes, navel relaxes, lower abdomen releases here. And then inhale, first third, inhale, second third, inhale, third third, up to your collarbones, and then exhale, top third releases, next third releases, third third releases, and continue this mental concentration on trying to fill up your whole torso here. And then exhale and releasing in 3 parts. This is why this is called modified 3-part breathing. but do this at your own pace. You might have to do this more slowly than I'm doing it. You might have to do it more quickly than I'm doing it. And that is okay. That's your way. And your way is the more beneficial way to do this kind of breathing. What you can do at some point is, maybe you've already figured this out, is you're creating a giant wave of breath. So the wave starts in the low abdomen, and you're piecing the three parts together to make a giant breath wave that inhales. At the end of the inhale, it crests, and then at the exhale, it releases. Notice that this is a cycle, which there are many in nature, and we're dedicating a main cycle, and that's the cycle of the seasons, or the cycle of the earth as it orbits around the sun in our solar system. So maybe a couple more of this three-part breathing. If you're finding the mental focus too strainful, drop it maybe less than the depth of the breath to make this something that's a little bit more manageable. Otherwise, a couple more rounds of this deeper breathing. When you are ready, slowly return back to your normal natural breath. If your eyes were closed, maybe gently open up your eyes. We'll do a little bit of a yang warm-up before we get into the first long-held yin posture. So since today is dedicated to a day of balance, the equinox, we'll try a little bit of a yang balance pose. So yang yoga means you're engaging muscle to stabilize the posture. And we'll try a balancing kneeling half moon pose. So make your way slowly onto hands and knees. Come to all fours. And we can do this warm up in stages. So plant your hands about shoulder width apart. Knees, shins, feet are nice and stable here. Spine is nice and neutral in this table pose here. So this is step number one. And then root through the right hand, the right knee, and move the right ankle out to the right a few inches or a few degrees, and then root through that right foot and that right shin here, because we'll eventually try to balance on that here, and the front hand. Turn your torso to the left, so rotate it to the left, and then extend the left leg out, press the left foot into the ground. Maybe tuck your tailbone forward slightly to kind of move the front thighs and the front of the pelvis forward here, just to try to create a feeling of balance here. So you're rooted through that foot. You can stay here if this is pretty precarious. Again, this is a yang posture, so muscles can be toning to maintain stability. The next stage, if you wish to try it, is to come into a balance, and that is to lift that back leg up until it's parallel to your torso. See how that feels. And for a lot of us, this is maybe enough. If you want a little more challenges here, take your left hand and extend it up towards the ceiling. And then if you really want to challenge your balance, maybe turn your head and your neck to look up towards the ceiling. And then maybe stay here one more breath. Look down when you're done with this pose, and then bring the hand down and slowly make your way back into a tabletop position. And then we'll try the other side here. So first, establish a nice stable table here. Root through the left hand and the left arm, because now you know it's going to take body weight. Root through the left knee. Turn the left shin out a few inches here. And then rotate your torso to the right. So it's facing to the right. Extend the right leg out. Press down through the right foot. Maybe move your hips forward to create a nice stable line here. This is stage number one. You can just stay here. Stage number two is root through your hand and that foot to raise the right leg up parallel to your torso. And you can just stay here, or you can raise your arm up. You can experiment with looking up towards the ceiling. And then when you're done with this, look down and slowly bring yourself back out of this posture here. All right, so that was a yang posture. In order to do that with integrity, there needed to be toning going on in the core and in the limbs. In yin, once we find our shape, we're trying to relax the muscle fiber so that the tension and the stress can go into the connective tissue. First yin posture that's up is called half saddle pose here. So I'll demonstrate the posture. This won't be for everyone. There might be too much strain in the knee joint or maybe in the low back or in the thigh. If that's the case, half saddle pose is essentially a back bend. So an alternative is Sphinx pose, which I'll demonstrate after half saddle here. So you start out with legs out in front. And then bend the left knee, bring the left heel back on the outside of the left hip. If you're looking at this and you're already cringing, then probably half saddle is maybe not for you. But if you're here and this is not painful, maybe it's a little bit uncomfortable, but it's not creating trauma or injury, then you can stay here. The next step in half saddle is to lower your torso back any amount. And if you have some height, if you have some padding, pillows or blankets, I have this fancy yoga bolster. I can place it behind my torso and then slowly lower myself down back onto the bolster for a little bit of extra support and extra height here. And then what you would like to do here is just soften everything. It's hard to do when you're feeling lots of strain somewhere. So typically, many people might feel the strain here in the front thigh, maybe in the knee joint, maybe in the ankle joint, maybe in the sacrum of the low back. I don't know where you're feeling it. But the idea is if it's just uncomfortable strain but not injurious strain, then you maintain that for as long as you can. We'll be here for about 3 minutes or so. Notice my knee is floating. A floating knee is okay as long as there's no pain. If there's pain, then you want to maybe put something under that knee to support it here. Same with your torso. Maybe you go back too far, then maybe you have to raise your torso up to a place that's kind of more manageable. So this is all part of finding your edge. Maybe your knee or your ankle or something in here just won't allow you to make this movement with your leg, in which case I suggest Sphinx as an alternative. For a Sphinx, you basically make your way onto your belly. Bring your elbows underneath your shoulders, shoulder width apart. Relax the muscles in your torso so your spine sags, and so that you feel a light compression in your lumbar and your sacral spine here. And then you just stay here. You can do whatever you want to with your head. You can hold it up, you can let it hang here. So that's a nice alternative if half saddle doesn't work. By the way, if you're familiar with full saddle, and full saddle is with both legs back here like this, and you feel like you get a better experience out of full saddle, you can also do that as an option here. Otherwise, we'll stick with half saddle here about halfway through, so maybe another minute and a half here in this version of half saddle. And so I'll go through the principles of yin, remind you of the mechanics of practice. So in yin yoga, we're targeting connective tissue, which likes long-held traction. So the first mechanic, the first principle, the first tattva is find your edge. That means you move your body into a yoga posture, you find the place where your body stops and starts to feel sensation. So first of all, your body is unique. Second of all, you're moving by feel, and you're stopping by feel, rather than by what it looks like or what you think it needs to look like, which means your ultimate edge may look nothing like mine. You might have to, if you're extremely flexible, you might have to find a way to go much deeper than I'm going. If you don't have as much range of motion as I do, then you're going to stop before I do, because you're going to start feeling something. You're going to start feeling that resistance here. So this is part of the process of finding that edge. It actually goes with the theme of class. The theme of class is the equinox. It's the balance point. And the edge is actually, it's a weird term to use, edge, because it's the edge of a balance point. You're trying to find that balance of not too little, not too much. In some yoga classes, it's called the Goldilocks position. You're trying to find the just right stopping point. That's your edge, and that can take a lot of time and practice here. Enough time has been spent in this side of half saddle, so if you've been here the whole time, it's time to slowly start coming out. So if you are in half saddle pose, kind of the easiest way out is to roll away from the bent leg here. So I'm going to roll over to the right until I can release this left leg. And then once I release it, I notice the reverberation from all that tension and traction by just moving that left leg around. So this is kind of the counter pose. You kind of move the leg up and down and side to side, kind of move the joints around the knee and the ankle, maybe the hips. And then when you realize that leg is still going to work for you, you slowly bring yourself up to seated, and then get ready for the other side. Now, if you're doing full saddle, then just do another round of full saddle. If you're doing Sphinx, maybe come out, rest in child's pose for a moment, and then do another round of Sphinx. Or maybe try this other side of half saddle, and maybe it works better for you. We're inherently asymmetric, so maybe one leg works and the other one doesn't. You have to try and experiment here. So bend the right knee. Bring the right knee on the outside of the right heel. Stay here for a moment to just see how this is going to feel. Maybe you need some height underneath your hips to kind of protect the knee or the ankle a bit. Or maybe you need padding underneath that whole shin. Then feel free to grab some padding, put it underneath whatever's creating the pressure point and see if that helps alleviate it. And then slowly bring yourself back as far as you go until you stop. And it may not be all the way to the ground. Maybe you need a little bit of height. I have one bolster here. It's okay to use 10 bolsters if that's what you need to find support here. And then we'll just stay here another 3 minutes. The second tattva of this yin practice is stillness. This is already a hard one, so we can spend years figuring out what our appropriate edges are in our postures. And in fact, since we're dynamic, changing beings, our edge changes every single day, so we need to always rediscover that edge. Once we found that edge, then we need to cultivate the fortitude and the patience to become still. Now, stillness doesn't mean we're rigidly non-moving. Stillness means we're dedicating ourselves to residing in the posture for a while, for a few minutes in this case. That means you can still adjust extremities. So most of the major stuff that's going on in this posture, going on in kind of the hips, the low back, the upper leg region here. So if you need to move a foot around a bit, or arms or head and neck around, then go ahead and do that. But try to soften, relax, and stay still in the main area of the body, kind of the core area. But instead of engaging muscles, we're trying to be still and soften and relax to release the muscle fiber, so that the tension, the stuckness that we're feeling is actually felt by the collagen fiber of the fascia here. This is more of a mental effort than a physical one, because it requires focus to stay still and relaxed. Otherwise our mind will wander, get busy, and we'll slowly begin to build muscular tension as our mind gets busier and busier. 1 more minute here on this side, if it's okay. By the way, it's okay to come out of a posture anytime. The time spent in a posture is part of the edge. You want to do advanced yin, you just spend longer time in the same posture here. So if you really like this posture and you want to spend 10 minutes here, then you just pause the video or ignore the video and just kind of stay here longer. Third principle of yin is time. So time is what does the work. We're wanting long light traction, and so we need long periods of time to do that. Rather than seconds, we want minutes. And ideally, we just hold this for as many minutes as we can stand until we can't stand it anymore. It's getting too painful, and that's just telling us we're hurting ourselves when we come out. In a structured sequence like this, we have to pick times, and the times here are anywhere from about 3 to 4 minutes per posture. Now, we spent plenty of time here on this side of half saddle, so we're going to start coming out here. Same procedure if you're in half saddle. By the way, if you're in full saddle, you have to just figure out how to get out of full saddle. If you're in Sphinx, lower yourself down, maybe come back in child's pose. If you're in half saddle, same procedure. Roll away from the leg that was bent until you can actually release that leg. And then the counter pose is just to feel the achiness, the reverberation of that posture. You can feel it, but through a little bit of motion. So notice I'm working my ankle joint, and I'm working my knee joint, and I'm working my hip joint, just to kind of notice the stiffness that was developing in those. That's the reverberation from that posture. And then at some point, slowly bring yourself up. When you get there, the next yin posture is called dragonfly pose, but will include a lateral bend with it. So dragonfly pose is the yin name for a wide-legged seated posture here. If you have a lot of tightness in your legs, you might want to sit up on some height. I do have a lot of tightness in my legs, so sitting up on some height, I'm using a yoga block here, but you can use books or pillows, blankets. You start out with legs extended, and then you bring them out to either side just as wide as they go for you. You'll know, because when they don't go anymore, that's as wide as they are. Some of us, there's so much strain in the bottoms of our legs that we have to keep our knees bent. You'll know this because you're feeling it. Some of you, really flexible here, and so you're not feeling anything. So you can even go wider if you need to. Some of us, maybe the knees need to be deeply bent to keep the strain from being painful that's running through the bottoms of our legs. You have to figure that out for yourself and figure out your angle here. And then we're going to try a lateral twist on either side. Grow up tall through your torso. Turn and face the right leg with your torso. And then laterally bend to the left side over the left leg. You can take your left hand and just rest it on the leg or rest it on the ground. I like to grab my calf here with my left hand here. You can do whatever you want to with your right arm. So it can just hang out here, it can hang out on the side. I like to rest my right arm behind my torso to kind of gently remind my right shoulder to ooze back, because I'm trying to get a very subtle twist in my, or not twist, but lateral bend in my torso here. And if I slouch forward too much, this is more of a forward fold. By the way, you can do a forward fold if you don't want to do the lateral bend. Otherwise, can stay your head, everything is soft. Now, if your head and neck are really strained from just hanging in midair, then the trick you can do is find some height. I don't know what you have for height. I'm grabbing another yoga block here. You can place it somewhere on the side of your left leg, put your elbow on it, and then use your forearm and your hand to rest your neck here. Because the emphasis of this posture is here, is in the main torso, in the hips again. We're getting a hip opener with dragonfly legs. We're getting a lateral bend here. And then we just stay here for another minute and a half or so. So this sequence is being recorded on the day of the equinox. Now, the day of the equinox, we know the equinox in terms of the amount of daylight. So the equinox is the day of the year when there are equal amounts of daylight and equal amounts of darkness. So there's 24 hours in a day, 12 hours of daylight, 12 hours of darkness on the equinox. And for most locations on the earth, it is only on the two equinoxes, the spring and the fall equinox, that this happens. Now, I live in the northern hemisphere on the face of the earth, and this is being recorded in the northern hemisphere, so it's being recorded on the fall, on the day of the fall equinox, or the autumn equinox here in the northern hemisphere. However, at exactly this time in the southern part of the earth, the southern half of the earth, they're also witnessing an equinox. But it's the spring equinox because their seasons are reversed. So while we're going into fall, the trees are turning color, the leaves are falling off, the weather's getting cooler. In the southern hemisphere, they're experiencing the opposite. It's springtime. Flowers are blooming. It's starting to warm up here. So just maybe one more breath here, and if you've been in the lateral bend the whole time, maybe help use your arms to stabilize your head and your neck and slowly bring yourself up out of the lateral bend. And to notice if there's some reverberation that requires a little bit of torso movement here. We're doing the other side of this. So if your legs are starting to get achy and they need a break, maybe this is a time to come out of dragonfly pose and just kind of work out the achiness of the legs. Otherwise, I'm just going to go right into the other side of this posture, do the lateral bend on the other side here. So maybe I need a block over on this side, maybe not. But I'll go up tall through the torso again. Now turn the other direction. So now turn to the left and then laterally bend to the right over the right leg. And then you can kind of figure out where you want your head, your neck, and your hands here. These all come down to basically personal preferences here, where these external limbs end up here. So what I'm doing is basically what kind of feels good for me to do, but you might want to have your arms and your head and neck in a different place. Again, you can let your head and neck hang, and this kind of feels okay for me at the moment, but maybe you don't want it hanging, so then you get your block. Find the height of the block that works for you, and just allow your head and your neck to hang here on this side. And don't worry how far you go. For some of us, we don't laterally bend very far. That's not the point. The point is to just laterally bend to your stopping point, and then to stay there for a couple more minutes here on this side. So the equinoxes happen twice a year, and they're markers. They're critical markers in the cycle of time that is a year. And because the tilt of the Earth axis is tilted, it's tilted 23.5 degrees. We, living on Earth, depending on where we live, experience different seasons as the Earth moves around the sun. So the tilt of the Earth axis is constant, but since it's constant as it travels around the sun, one axis of the Earth is kind of leaning towards the sun part of the year. In the north, when the North Pole is leaning towards the sun, we experience summer. When the North Pole leans away from the sun, we experience winter. That's in the northern hemisphere. Not so in the southern hemisphere, because that pole is pointing in the opposite direction. In the southern hemisphere, they experience summer in November, December, January, February. They experience winter in June, July, and August. So that's their winter. And today, even though it's a wonderful, beautiful autumn day here in the northern hemisphere, spring flowers and orchards are blooming at the moment in the southern hemisphere. And it's a reminder to us in the Northern Hemisphere that we're moving in from a very warm summer yang season that has to be balanced out with a colder, still, darker yin season, which is winter. And the peak of the winter season, of course, is the solstice in December. But right now, everything is equal. Everything is balanced here. So we have about 3 more breaths on this side. Notice if this is feeling balanced, or at some point in this posture, this got a little bit too achy and now it's a little bit painful. If you're noticing that, that's your cue to come out. Well, we're all going to come out of this posture here. So you can use your hand and your arm to slowly press yourself up, rather than straining torso muscles, and then maybe slowly wake up the torso muscles by working around. And we're done with the wide-legged seat here. So you can slowly bring your legs in. You don't have to be jarring with this. You can use your hands to slowly bring in each leg, bend the knee here. And then maybe point and flex the feet a few times, bob the knees up and down, kind of wobble from side to side. Just wiggle around to notice all the things that got stuck and stagnated during that long hip opener. And then the next yin posture is an outside hip opener known as square pose. So you'll come to seated. For this pose, I like to not sit up on some height. This is personal preference on my part. So you'll find if you need to sit up or sit down here. So to get into square, you'll start out with legs out in front. Bend the left knee, draw the left shin kind of perpendicular to your line of sight. Take your right knee, bend it, and then see if you can stack your right shin on top of your left shin. Some of us, this isn't going to happen. So there'll be an alternative for this. It'll be shoelace. I'll demonstrate that in a minute here. But you can make little micro adjustments here. The heels can be closer in towards your hips. They can be a little bit farther out. They can be a little bit farther in. You find kind of where your heels need to be. And if your knees are floating, this is supposed to be a hip opener. So if your knees are floating and that's painful and you need some stability, put a prop underneath the knee that's hurting. And maybe it's one, maybe it's both. Maybe it's not this knee. Maybe this one is floating and hurting. So this knee needs the prop, and it doesn't have to be something hard. It can be something soft. Now you can just stay here if you're feeling lots in your hips. If you're wanting more and you're wanting a forward fold, then slowly hinge yourself forward. Do this slowly so you can find your stopping point here. And then if you need support for your torso or your head, go ahead and get it. So maybe hanging in midair doesn't feel so good. So grab padding, blankets, pillows, bolster. Maybe your head and your neck is a little bit achy. So maybe that's what needs the support here. And then you just stay here and you notice your breath. You notice the subtle sensations. You keep track of them. And this helps to keep you out of harm's way, because if pain crops up, if you're paying attention, you'll notice it right away. And you'll be able to come out of the posture here a little bit sooner. So if square pose is not working for you, you can try shoelace pose. And for shoelace pose, you actually try to stack one knee on top of the other. So the left knee comes in towards center and you stack the right knee on top of it here. And for some people, this might actually work better than square pose. So try this alternative. You can also do the classic runner's stretch, which I call eye of the needle, but it's also called figure 4 or reclined pigeon pose. Remember, give yourself a break, and if 1 or 2 minutes is enough in this pose, then please come out. But the emphasis is here in the outside of the hips, even though A lot of us might feel it here in the knees. A little tiny bit of pressure in these joints is okay. Anything sharp is injury, it's trauma. And so keep that in mind when you're experiencing the achiness of these postures here. So maybe a little less than a minute here. Again, you can stay upright or you can fold forward. You can maybe release the muscle fiber in your torso again. Allow yourself to continue to just kind of ooze and soften here in this posture. And then recall the idea that there's more than one way to be balanced. You can do very active balancing postures, or you can try to cultivate a mindset and an emotional mindset of balance here on this day of balance, of equal day and equal night here. So maybe 2 or 3 more breaths here. And then when you're ready, maybe use your hands and your arms, if you folded forward, to bring yourself up. Lean back to extend your legs forward. Maybe wiggle your legs around here. I'm a big fan of windshield wipers. So arms come back, plant your hands in the ground behind you, bend your knees, feet go wide, and then gently bob your knees to one side, bring them up towards center, bob them to the other side. Maybe make a few cycles to either side here. And then we do have the other side of square pose or shoelace to do here. So legs come out long here, and now it's the right shin that's on the bottom, and then the left shin is on top. Make your personal adjustments of where you need the heel and the knee to be. Find your personal padding for a knee here, or maybe come into shoelace here. Root through both hips, go up tall through your torso. And you can invite yourself to just stay here if you're feeling enough. But if you want more, then you can invite yourself forward any amount. And feel free to use whatever padding you need to support your torso or your head or neck here. And then we'll reside here for a few more minutes. So these time points that mark the seasons, like the equinoxes during fall and during spring, like the solstices that mark winter and that mark summer. These are important calendar time markers that the ancients used to keep track of the yearly cycles. They realized that things happened, the seasons kept happening on a yearly cycle, and particularly during the ages when people were starting to grow crops, during agricultural cultures, it was very important to know when things were going to happen so that you could plant a crop, some plants at the proper time, so that they had a chance to grow during the normal growing season. So calendar keeping became very important, and they realized quickly that you could use the apparent motion of the sun and the moon and the stars to keep track of all this, although most of the cycles that we see aren't really due to the sun's motion. They're due to the Earth's motion around the sun, and due to the fact that the Earth has a tilted axis. So the term equinox means equal. It's just a modified form of equal day, equal night. And if the Earth had no tilt, if its axis wasn't tilted, if it pointed straight up, same direction as the pole of its orbit around the sun, then every single day would be an equinox day. It would be equal. But because the Earth is slightly tilted on its side, we experience the seasons in most locations, maybe except at the North Pole and the South Pole and the equator. But everywhere else, we notice the variations in daylight, in nighttime, in warmth, and in coolness. And that's all brought about by this effect of the Earth having a tilted axis. Now, since we live on Earth, it seems more that the sun has something to do with the solstices, because it seems like the sun is the thing that's moving, even though it's actually the Earth that's moving. So we consider the solstices and the equinox as a solar holiday or a solar marker, because of course when you're standing on the Earth, it looks like it's actually the sun that's doing all the moving around, that's slowly moving north in the summertime, slowly moving south in the wintertime. If you're in the northern hemisphere, doing the opposite in the southern hemisphere here. Hopefully, we've considered the seasons long enough to get through this side of square pose. So if you fold it forward, slowly bring yourself up. Maybe slowly remove your props and lean back and release your legs and do whatever kind of counter move, which might actually just be resting here, that you would like to do to kind of slowly work out these reverberations, these feelings of stuckness here. And then we'll get into the next yin posture. This is a reclined twist that we're doing next. So we'll make our way onto our back, extend our legs out. Head and neck are comfortable. By the way, I was thinking you could grab a pillow to put underneath your head and neck, if that helps here a lot. Bend your right knee. Maybe initially kind of draw this right knee in towards your torso a little bit. And then inch your hips a little bit over to the right, maybe an inch or two, to make it easier to stack your hips and twist. Take your left hand, place it on the right knee, and then help guide that right knee over to the left. So notice I'm stacking the right hip on top of the left hip. I want to melt my right shoulder back towards the floor so that my torso is in a spinal twist. Right shoulder doesn't have to make it to the floor, but I want to ensure that I'm in a twist rather than just hanging out on my side here. So right shoulder melts back, and then my right arm extends out into a T position here. If it's okay with your head and your neck, you can turn and look over down that right arm. If it's too much for that right arm, keep your head, for your neck, keep your head kind of neutral looking up. If your knee is floating like mine is, that's creating pain, grab a prop to place underneath that knee. Or underneath that leg here. I grabbed a bolster here. Some of you, your knees will make it to the floor. Some of you, your knees will float, and it'll be just fine that they're floating here. So notice what you're experiencing and adjust the posture for what you're experiencing. So this is the pose. We'll just hang out here in this twist. Another couple of minutes here. So here in the Northern Hemisphere, we're moving into fall from summer. So metaphorically speaking, summer is a yang season as far as nature's concerned. It's long lengths of day, very, very warm and hot temperatures. Nature and animals very, very busy. Plants are growing, animals are moving. This is the yang time. This is the time of activity, of light here. But it's balanced by a time of darkness and stillness and quiet, and that is the winter season. So no matter what hemisphere you're in, there's always a balance. So instead of having summer all year around, the Earth experiences a half summer and a half winter-like season, a half yang season and a half yin season. And it's on this day where it's neither yin or yang, it's balanced. It's a dynamic polarity of a balance between a yin and a yang, the light and the dark, activity and stillness. And we experience those twice a year on the equinoxes as balance. And then we move into either a very yang period of time, or either moving into summer, if you live in the southern hemisphere, or you're moving into winter, when you move into the northern hemisphere. And this is a reminder, this is nature reminding us of the cycle of life, the cycle of nature. And since we are human beings, we are creatures of nature. We are creatures of cycling. And we are being reminded that with all that is light and with warm, we must also have our balanced amount of darkness and stillness. And the equinoxes, the solstices, all of these natural markers as the earth makes its journey around the sun is reminding us of these things. So a reminder for one more breath on this side of the twist. And then when you're ready, use your inhale to bring the hips back to normal. That right knee comes up and maybe you can extend your legs out. I'm feeling like doing a waterfall here, just to bring the spine back to neutral. Engage the core muscles and just to lengthen the legs out. You can point and flex the feet a few times. And we'll get into the other side of the twist here. So now it's the right leg that's extended out. Left knee is bent. Maybe draw the left knee in towards the torso a bit. Right hand finds the left knee. Left hand extends out like an outrigger. And for some of you, you might have to inch your hips over to the left so that when you draw the left knee over to the right side, the hips will stack more accessibly, more comfortably here. You'll have to experiment with how to do this to find where your hips need to be so that they can stack. And then you melt this left shoulder back towards the floor. And then decide if you need a prop underneath this knee. This is as far as my knee goes. It's floating, it feels fine. So I just stay here. Maybe your knee makes it all the way to the ground. Lucky you here. Maybe that creates pain. And if it does, maybe you want to back the knee off and put some padding underneath it here. Head and neck can look over this left shoulder if that's okay with the neck. If the neck is not really liking that, then keep your head and neck neutral here. And then we'll stay here for a few more minutes on this side here. So nature is a teacher. It's teaching us about cycles and balances. And the interesting thing about cycles and balances is they do cycle. So there's an upswing and there's a downswing. If the Earth's orbit was a pendulum, then the equinoxes would be the very bottom of the swinging pendulum. And the places where the pendulum stops and switches direction, those would be the solstices. By the way, the word solstice means to stand still, which is kind of what a pendulum looks like it's doing when it changes directions. It swings one way, it slows down, it stops momentarily, and then it reverses direction, it goes the other way, and it moves very quickly through the bottommost point of its swing, and that's the point of the equinox. In fact, if you watch the sun as it rises in different spots along the horizon during the year, it acts just like a pendulum. So during a solstice, the winter or summer solstice, the sun hangs around at a certain point on the horizon when it rises. And it doesn't move very much. That's why it's called a solstice. Because the ancients noticed that it's like, wow, the sun is kind of like wondering, trying to make up its mind whether it wants to keep going or if it wants to switch direction. We don't know. And always the sun decided to switch directions. At the equinoxes, the sun is moving. The sun is moving a lot. Its apparent position changes dramatically every day around the equinoxes because it appears to move. It's not really the sun moving, it's the perspective of the earth changing as the earth moves around the sun, and the consequence of perspective when you have a planet with a tilted axis here. 5 more breaths on this side. And so here we are being reminded by one of the greatest teachers and gurus about balance and cycling, and that is nature herself. She's saying she goes through cycles, she goes through changes. So do we. And an equinox is a reminder of the swinging pendulum, going from yang season to yin season. In the northern hemisphere, we're going from yin season to yang season in the southern hemisphere. One more breath and then slowly begin to bring yourself out of this twist. When you get there, maybe extend both legs long, point and flex the feet, extend the legs up towards the ceiling in waterfall pose. Maybe you can even grab the backs of your thighs here and really push your heels up towards the ceiling until you're feeling some good extension in the backs of your legs. You can bend your knees too at some point, draw your knees in, give your knees a nice hug here. And now we'll move into a resting pose, into Shavasana. If there's any other kind of movement you want to do, then do that here for a while. And then when you're feeling ready, move yourself into a bit of stillness here. It can be traditional Shavasana, just lying on the ground, arms and legs comfortably extended. Maybe move them apart so you have a little bit of room between limbs here. Head and neck are comfortable. Oh, this is a good time to grab a pillow if you have one here. You can practice other restorative postures, reclined butterfly, legs up the wall. Maybe you have your own version. You can just lay on your side here, or you can do a wide-legged child's pose. Think of your favorite restorative postures. You can even sit quietly in meditation. This is important because you want to find a posture and position that you can truly release and relax in. So it has something that has to feel safe and stable and comfortable so that your body can relax enough that your brain has a chance to follow suit. So whatever you're doing now, if it's so uncomfortable that it cannot calm your brain down, try something different here. Otherwise, if your body has found stillness, start to release the tension that still remains in the body. So I always like to start with my head because I'm kind of an academic, intellectual creature, and I store a lot of the tension of the workings of my brain in my face. So you can try releasing your jaw, your tongue, the inside of your mouth, let it be soft, the skin around the outside of your mouth, your lips, the nose and the chin, the insides and the outsides of the cheeks. There might be tension there. Notice the area of skin around each ear and see if that can soften. Soften the muscles that ring your eye sockets here. And maybe that space in between the eye sockets. So this whole area of the level of your eyes can be softened here. Forehead and temples, crown of your head. So whole face, whole head. See if it can release. And finally, give your brain permission to release. And by release, I mean just let it wander aimlessly. No agenda. Nowhere to go. Nothing to do. Nothing to think about except the random thoughts that are just moving through your brain. And whatever the random thoughts are, you let them go. You let them come in. You let them leave. New ones will come in. You let them leave. And let it be acceptable for the mind to just wander randomly here. Soften through the rest of your body. Maybe your collarbones, maybe your upper body is a little bit stiff, so you allow that to soften. Arms soften, relax through your right arm, right palm, right fingers, left arm, left palm, and left fingers. Notice your fingertips and see if you can notice a light tingling in your fingertips. Notice that energy. That's you. That's your life energy. Soften through the rest of your torso. Relax your rib cage. Soften your abdomen. Release down through your pelvis. Soften your thighs and knees. Soften your lower legs, so the shins and the calves, your ankles, soles and tops of your feet. Soften all of your toes. Stop and notice the tips of your toes. See if you can feel the tip of each toe on each foot. See if you can notice a sense of vibrancy, of energy. Clear down there in the tips of your toes. Release, relax, and surrender your body-mind 100%. Feel as if you're slowly melting into the floor, and then continue to notice the cycling that's happening in your own body. You can feel the rise and the fall of your own breath. Some of you might even be able to detect your circulation, your blood flow, the pulse of your blood through your veins here. That too is a cycle. And then for a moment, visualize your life cycling through the 4 seasons. The spring, the warmth of summer, the letting go of fall, and the winter. Slowly begin to bring movement back into fingers and into toes. Bring your awareness back into the room. You can begin to deepen your breath. Maybe expand the physical motion into hands and into feet. Then up into arms and into legs. You can rock your head a deck gently from side to side. When you're feeling ready, gently bend both knees. Roll over to one side. When you get there, stay there for a moment and give yourself a big thank you for your practice and your efforts. But especially give yourself a big thank you for you, your unique manifestation in the universe. The universe is ecstatically joyful that you are here. And then when you're feeling ready, slowly bring yourself up. Find a comfortable seat. When you get there, draw your hands in front of heart center. I'll end practice with an Om. You can either listen or maybe join in. The inner light in me honors the inner light in you. Namaste. Happy equinox, everyone.